Well, I've been talking about the precepts a lot this summer, and I'm reading an online book that just was recently made available, and I realized when we take the precepts, we're going backwards if we don't know very much about Buddhism, about this path. The precepts are our statement to ourselves that we're going to go a little bit further in exploring these teachings, and that we're making a commitment to some practical training guidelines. And there was a wonderful list at the back of this book that I'm looking at. I'm not going to read the whole list, but it talks about the value of those precepts as part of the essentials of the teachings of the Buddha. And so I wanted to share some of these with you because I realized people always ask the question, well, what do Buddhists believe? And what's different about Buddhism and a religion? Or do you think of yourself as a religion? And those are questions that can get a different answer depending on the day sometimes. But I wonder, how many of you, especially if you're interested in taking the precepts, do you feel like you have a really good grasp on what Buddhism is, why you're doing this? Yeah, Marilyn?
Well, I basically, I don't know if I would define it, but I think I have a good grasp of what the reasonings are and how the philosophy is. Basically,
you don't have to list it. What drew you? Say, what drew you here in the first place? I know you've been a Buddhist for a long time. But what, for other people who are newer, maybe, what drew you here?
I think of Buddhism as the end of suffering and how we say, may I do well, may I be happy, may I be peaceful.
So that's what it's doing for you, right? That's good. Georgia?
Yeah, I actually never knew I was suffering until I didn't have a little bit. And each day or time, it seems that I'm aware that I don't have to go through life acting. I always felt like I was an actor, acting for that person, this person, and never being authentic, never feeling like I was a person. I just felt like I was somebody walking through life. And now I appreciate so much more of that. I never even knew it before.
So you weren't even aware of suffering, that was even suffering. So, I think that's how it had to be, right? You're somebody's daughter, you're somebody's mother, you're something. Yeah, that's a really good point, because there are a lot of people who would say, especially I think in the West, well, we don't suffer. I'm not suffering. Our life's good. It's so much, and we would immediately say, our lives are so much better than most of the world, right? That suffering's a luxury. That we won't admit that we're not happy all the time. We won't admit that there are things in life that are hard for us, stressful, uncomfortable, dissatisfying. And so that recognition that, oh yeah, there is stuff that I don't have to be the way I thought I had to be. And then you recognize that never felt good. We get so used to it, right? We get so used to the things that we cling on to that we don't even see them as the suffering, because that's when suffering seems to be not a good translation, because we're usually in denial about that.
But I feel like I have a choice too, how I approach it.
And that's what the Buddha was teaching, right? We have a choice And that's what the Four Noble Truths are about. And a lot of people think he just taught about suffering, but it's exactly the way you're talking about it. There's a choice. We have to accept the nature of the world, the nature of reality, but we don't have to live in this world in a way that causes us to suffer. Yeah, it's a big difference. So then it's okay to recognize suffering, because the next thing we do is recognize, oh, we don't have to do that suffering anymore. Yeah, it's liberating. It's freedom. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because there's so many I've heard so many people say, well, I don't have any suffering. I love the way this life is just treating me. I love all this. And usually that's not really true. They might have just figured out a way to buck up under it. So it's okay to recognize that we are not always happy, that we often want things that we can't have, and we lose things that we love a lot. And that's reality. So we can learn how to work with those things in a different way. Who else has what's your take on Buddhism?
I think for me, I was raised where if you had a problem with suffering, you had to reach out and find something to fix it, or to control. So for me, over time, what I've learned is in just practicing over and over again is that in my own mind, within myself, I can change things. I can change how I view something. I can change how attached I am to something, rather than rely on someone else or something else to fix it.
To fix it.
And so, I mean, that's been 60 years of learning. But I think since I've been coming here for all these years, I'm constantly reminded of that when we do the meditation, because I have to go inside of me, in my mind, to negotiate those things.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah, and I don't have control, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, we are fixers, right? We're fixers, we're caretakers. That becomes that enabler, and we think if there's a problem, we have to act on it and fix it. And usually that's not the best approach to take, right? Usually there's a lot of stuff inside, and some things we can't fix. And that's where a lot of suffering comes from.
I do that a lot. I used to, when my family had problems, I wanted to, help everybody, so that I was carrying all their stuff.
Yep.
And I wasn't happy. So
No.
I had to learn to be there for them, but I can only do so much, and they gotta find their way. But it took me a long time. I was doing that my whole life.
Yeah.
Probably until a year, or this year, that I was like, I can't do that anymore, because I wasn't happy.
You're not happy, and you're stressed, and yeah.
I was depressed, everything.
Yeah.
I was just carrying everything. So sometimes I had to learn that they gotta deal with their stuff.
Yeah.
It's their patterns that they keep doing, and it's like, I'm always there. So now it's like, I'm there, I help, I try to listen, try to give advice, but that's all I can do.
Then you back away from the vehicle, right? Yeah, and that's hard. That's hard. Because all of us might be that person in our families, or we might see maybe our children or someone else being that in the family, and we see it's just like they're being beat on all the time. And you want to say, don't let them do that to you.
And then if I spoke up, it was like, oh, she doesn't care. So it was now it's like, I can't.
Yeah.
I had to learn to. I'm still learning. Working on it.
That's good for you, but that's hard, isn't it?
It is. It's really hard.
Yeah, but you have to keep going, because people have to live their own journey, and it's sometimes really hard to accept that. and we can have ourselves just ground into dust, before it's our time. So I think the teachings give us some wonderful things to hold on to and to work with, because we can see how it will change our lives. We begin to see that it will change our lives. So the one of the things I love, and this is by a Buddhist group actually, this is from an old speech or talks that were given by Bhikkhuni Vimala back in 1933, but a group has, and I think it's a nun that I know in South Carolina, but there's a group of Buddhists who have published it, but they've updated it with lots of references to the suttas that probably weren't translated at that point, and it's very relevant. It's not an old-fashioned or outdated book. But it talks about that, let me just tell you some of the things that I think we've talked about. So Buddhism is based on personal experience. As such, it is rational and not speculative. So I love that. It's all based on what we experience. Because if we can't experience the teachings of the Buddha firsthand, then, he said, don't buy into this, come and see for yourself. So we have to actually experience what everybody's talked about. And it can't just be because we want it to be that way or we intellectually think it's that way. It has to be from our personal experience. Part of that's on the cushion, part of that's from our meditation, but the majority of it is just in our day-to-day lives. Just how are our lives changing when we have studied even a few of the teachings, when we've been sitting just for a short time. Like, how does it resonate in our daily life? That has to be the way it is. And it doesn't call it a religion. Buddhism is a moral and philosophical system that expounds a unique path to enlightenment and is not a subject to be studied from a mere academic standpoint. So studying it is wonderful, but that's not how you are a Buddhist. That's not how you live the teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha discarded all authority and developed a golden mean that was purely his own. And rational understanding is the keynote of Buddhism. So I like to think that a Buddhist is the philosophy of pragmatism, but rationality is, and blind beliefs are rejected. Instead of beliefs and dogmas, the importance of practice is emphasized. Mere beliefs and dogma cannot liberate a person. So when we talk about Buddhism as a philosophy, we have to remember that the goal is to achieve enlightenment. So it's more than a philosophy, because enlightenment is still the far, far away goal, or it might be in this lifetime goal. So there are no mediators, so there's no priestly group, a priest group that mediates between us and some deity. So the monks and the nuns are not mediators. We're not like priests. And in this, there's also one of the points is they're just different ways to live. So whether you're a lay person or a monk or a nun, that's even outlined in one of these talks about that the Buddha provided different ways to have the experience of his teachings. One is to be a monastic, where you're more dedicated to it instead of a householder's life. So it doesn't mean a householder is less dedicated to the teachings. It just means we have different ways that we're living these teachings. So there's nothing like a spiritual mediator or someone. A lot of times we give blessings, but I always think it's important for us to remember that we all give these blessings. It's not just a monk or a bhikkhu or a bhikkhuni who gives blessings. Because there's nothing channeling through us to do that. But the Buddha taught that all the blessings that we give, the blessings are based on how we live our lives. So, and how we like merit is just sending forward the abundance of our good actions out to others. So we all do that. So it's a kind of a ritual when we have a monk do it or a bhikkhuni do it, because we can all do it. So I think that's important for us to remember. But
But we do that when we practice loving kindness.
exactly, those are the blessings. So that's what causes the world to be safer for us, because when we make other people and other living beings feel safe, and that's through the precepts, but also through things like practicing loving kindness, when we create that, when we radiate that harmlessness and that loving kindness, it causes beings around us to feel safer around us. So it does change. It's changing, like our energy field is changing. So that safety, when the Buddha taught that the loving kindness chant to the monks, it was because they were afraid of all the spirits up in the trees, because the spirits were afraid of the monks. The little devas up in the trees thought at first they were okay, but then they realized those monks were going to live in their forest, live in their jungle, and they thought they're going to get rid of us, they're going to chase us away, the spirits did. And so they started spooking the monks, making the monks think there were bad spirits there because the spirits were afraid of the monks. And the Buddha said, no, go back and chant these words. And it was the Metta Sutta and so they were saying, may all the creatures here be well, be peaceful, and may all the four-legged and the six-legged and the eight-legged, and so then the spirits realized these people don't mean any harm to us. They want to live peacefully with us. So they quit scaring the monks, and they came down, and they would even come down and listen to the teachings and listen and be practicing with the monks. So that's part of what we're doing. And when we live the precepts, that's what we're doing. We become really safe to beings in this world because we're doing no harm, and they sense that. People sense that. I mean, people know probably if you're someone who gets enraged and blows up all the time and shouts and screams at people. They know if you might be someone they'd be nervous around. And then when we begin to practice when we start our training in those guidelines for that, the harmless and kind behaviors, then that becomes another little, we're putting those vibes out literally. And so in the essential teachings of Buddhism, the essential teachings are about the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path and the 10 perfections, or this book calls it the 10 excellent qualities. Those are the basic teachings, and understanding the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path and the 10 perfections, or the 10 essential qualities. All those are just the basic. That's the whole essence of the Buddhist teachings. And so, as we practice those, when we take the precepts and use them, we talk about these are the guidelines that I'm undertaking. These guidelines. what we're really doing is I'm undertaking these essential teachings of the Buddha, and I'm working with them every day to see, do they work for me? Do they work in my life? Do they make sense? Are they helping me? Am I becoming happier? Is my life becoming more joyful? And those kind of questions that may seem selfish at first, like, am I happier? But we all know if we're happy and peaceful, that other people love to see that. I mean, we can be a real burden on our friends and our families if we're miserable. And that happiness, when we can experience happiness, we're always sharing it. And so the precepts are more than just a kind of ritual we do. It's really, this is the perfect way to study the teachings of the Buddha and to put them into practice in your life. And then these are the essential teachings of the Buddha. So I like seeing it more that way. Like, this is how we continue our experience of the teachings of the Buddha. So it's got to be real. It's got to be us doing it. And nobody's the boss of us. I mean, the Buddha was, he was breaking rules of his day all the time because he knew it was right to do that. So accepting women into the Sangha, to be on the same level as the men, that had never been done before. And not recognizing caste among his monks and nuns, that had never been done before. So it's okay to not have to think like the herd. And so the herd is pretty powerful. The herd is what runs social media. So it's okay when we know something is right to be okay with that. We don't need to proselytize it. We can know it's right and still be kind and still find the right time and the right place to share that with people. But it's okay not to be following the mainstream. Because a lot of times people will say, I always feel like I'm going against the grain, like with my family, with the people I work with. That's okay. That's maybe a good sign. Okay, thank you, everybody.